Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. A Monday night after a weekend where I actually took 2 days off back to back. Didn't do any live streams on Saturday or yesterday. Just needed a breather. But we're back at full strength today. We did a live stream for Patreon members at 6 o'clock, and so they have they have a step ahead of the game here. And now we open the door to everyone on our 7:30 live stream, including those of you who are on my weather app. You got your notification that the live stream is underway, plus my followers from my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, Angry Ben's Facebook page, Angry Ben's Angry Weather, and New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Stormwatch, plus those of you on my Patreon page. So let's get going. I've got a couple of things that I am going to get into tonight. The first thing is this major storm that is developing in the plains for Tuesday and Wednesday, and already we've got a ton of winter storm warnings, watches, and blizzard warnings. When we did the 6 o'clock live stream, there were only 2 counties in Nebraska that had blizzard warnings. Now the entire western third of the state under a blizzard warning, and also a chunk of northeastern Colorado, winter storm warnings peppering around that, winter storm watches that extend up into parts of into South Dakota, not quite to the North Dakota border, but almost there. I think the bigger story with this is going to be the rain, the heavy rain that's going to occur in the plains and on up into portions of Iowa and particularly into southern Minnesota. It's been brutally cold. There's record snowpack here from record snows for the month of February. This exists also in the Dakotas, but it's the warmer air is confined really more to the southeastern part of the state than anything else. So where you see the flood watches here, particularly in the northern flank of this, the northeastern flank of this, there could be some serious flooding with the water, just the rainfall just immediately running off, plus add a little snow melt to that. Also, we're talking about a pretty strong storm from the standpoint of pressure. There's going to be wind with this in a big way. So you already have high wind watches and some high wind warnings that are already up for Texas, for West Texas, western Oklahoma, New Mexico, and into southeastern Colorado. There's going to be a severe weather threat on Tuesday in West Texas out of this system. And this is also going to take a couple of days to play out as it moves its way north-northeast. The good news for those of you in the eastern part of the United States, this storm is going more north than anything else. It's taking a pretty far left track, and doesn't have a whole lot of there's not a lot of easterly component of motion to this, at least not initially. So with all this energy going by well to the west, this is going to keep the eastern part of the United States high and dry at least into Thursday morning before weather conditions start to deteriorate. I don't think I'm going to, for my folks, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England and everybody in between, including New York City and Philadelphia, I don't think we're going to see any rain until later Thursday night and maybe during the day on Friday. And that's the only day this week where we've got issues with respect to rainfall. WPC has their forecast, and this is over the next 7 days. So they're showing pretty much a 1.5 to 2.5 inch range across Nebraska, South Dakota, and into southwestern Minnesota. But again, it's really that the snow cover, the deep snow cover, and some of that's going to melt with warm temperatures heading all the way up, at least initially going all the way up almost to International Falls before cold air comes in on the backside. Much of the rainfall this week, by the way, focused in the middle of the country. There's not a whole lot going on either side. In the east, the rain that you're seeing here is all going to be induced by Friday when this system gets here. Amazing that it's as close as it is, relatively speaking. We've seen storms in that position impact us 24 or so hours later, and this is going to take 3 or 4 days. Also, except for the northwest, weather conditions seem to calm down in California, and that's because we're going to be getting rid of the trough in the west and replacing it with a ridge in the west. And on the other side of that, we're going to be getting rid of the ridge in the east and gradually replacing that with a trough in the east. And that's going to be for this coming weekend and into next week. Satellite view tonight shows that you're seeing the beginnings of the table being set. And I've got the water vapor loop, which I'm going to show you in a second. But you got that tropical stream of moisture coming out of the Pacific. That has, that's already made its appearance, and all that moisture, that high-level moisture, streaming up into the southwest and into Texas and into the western plains. If you look on the center left, you can see the rotation. That is the upper low that is coming inland, the shortwave trough that's going to generate all this. And meanwhile, in the east, you've got some residual moisture left from the old frontal boundary, producing some high clouds in the southeast and to the southern portions of the mid-Atlantic. But that cloud line has been gradually sinking southward, and that puts that puts things in a good position for the weather in my neck of the woods, as I said, at least into Thursday. So I want to bring up the mid-level water vapor loop, because that actually, these water vapor loops are so useful because you can basically pick apart the atmosphere and see the different pieces coming together. The short wave that's in California coming inland, you can see the distinct rotation there of the mid-level moisture. Also, all this mid-level moisture coming out of the Pacific tropics and shooting up into Texas and on up into Oklahoma and Arkansas. The warm sector is starting to set up along the Gulf Coast. And then you've got the energy up in the Rockies that's moving east, and the darker blue is the drier air that at mid-levels that is streaming eastward over the top. So kind of gives you these water vapor loops are fun to look at because they do give you a real sense. You can look at the low levels, the mid-levels, the high levels. They give you a real sense of what you're, what's at play with regards to some of the shortwave troughs that are moving. And you can actually see surges of dry air and moist air that get involved with these systems as they start getting organized and eventually translating their way up into the northern latitudes. If you look up in southeastern Canada, you can see the remnants of the weekend weather system as that pulls away to the east. So with regards to snowfall here, where the areas that are under blizzard warnings actually, in Nebraska, that's where the Weather Service amounts are up for a foot plus. And that finger of a foot plus runs up into South Dakota. Now, some of these areas may actually start as rain and then go over to snow. And you'll notice as you go further north, the amounts really do tail off quite a bit. It's not that we're not in the time frame of it, but the storm is going to peak in its intensity when it's down in eastern Colorado and in west Kansas. So the heavy snows are going to be falling through much of Wednesday, but after that, the storm is going to start to weaken as it moves to the northeast. So you see that the amounts do go down as you head up north toward northeastern North Dakota. And then, of course, the warmer air is impacting the snow amounts that you're seeing for parts of Minnesota here in the western part of Minnesota. Rain is going to be, I think, again, the bigger deal. And the forecast rain amounts from the Weather Service kind of match up with what WPC has. And it does, it all makes a lot of sense to me in terms of when I looked at everything on the computer models. Some of these rainfall amounts, we'll just wait for the numbers to clear up a bit to get rid of the snow amounts. I don't know if you can see those numbers too well. I wish we could make them bigger, but this is as big as it allows you on the digital display site. But you're looking at rainfall amounts of 1.5 to 2 inches running through Nebraska. Now, some of this in western Nebraska, a good chunk of this might wind up being snow, but on the eastern flank of this and on up into parts of Minnesota, these 1 inch plus rainfalls are all just mostly rain. So adding to that that flooding concern. And I think we're likely to see the flood watch areas expanded as we go through the next 24 to 36 hours. The surface map tonight, the different sectors are beginning to, they start the process of this major storm developing. An obvious warm sector beginning to set up across South Texas and through the lower portions of the Gulf of Mexico. But the initial push is going to be in Texas. You've got a frontal boundary that runs just north and west of the coastline, where temperatures on the other side are in the 60s, 50s, and even the 40s. But in the warm sector, you've got dew points in the 70s already, and temperatures that late this afternoon, I'll put the latest map up, were reaching up toward the 80-degree mark. And that stretches down through much of southern Louisiana, through the Florida Panhandle and into Florida. Very warm, moist air mass beginning to take hold, and that is part of the equation here. Lower pressures down in the southwest, waiting for that shortwave trough to just kind of get in there and swing to the east. Otherwise, in the eastern part of the United States, we've got this big high over Iowa. It's going to take its sweet time moving eastward, and the air that's coming down from the north, it's not really all that cold. We're seeing temperatures in the 20s throughout much of southern Canada, the source region for this. So this is not an especially cold air mass, and we're certainly not seeing the kind of cold air that we saw last week. Now, let me bring up the radar, the latest radar on the wide view. And in the east, we do have some snow showers and a little bit of lake effect going on in upstate New York, and some leftover snows in parts of northern New England. Also, from yesterday's frontal boundary, we have some showers down in the Carolinas, down through southern Georgia, and then at a small area, risk area of severe, by the way. There's some strong cells here in southern Georgia at the moment. You can see them moving southeastward. The Storm Prediction Center actually does have a small area of marginal risk for this region. And then as we move out to the west, they thin out, but you're starting to see the energy that is going to make that big storm in the plains with the radars very active, sending a lot of rain into Arizona, and also some showers into New Mexico, and you're starting to see some showers and some rain breaking out in parts of West Texas. So it's all going according to plan. Not a whole lot happening except right along the immediate coast of the Northwest, as you're beginning to see some energy coming inland. Let me go to the SPC's website, and we'll take a look at what the Storm Prediction Center has to say with regards to the severe weather threat. So you can see it today. Today's threat is this small area. Oh, there it goes. I lost it. All right, so let's just put the maps up to make it easier. So here we have this marginal risk, small area of marginal risk there in southwest Georgia and the Florida Panhandle. Another small area of risk coming tonight for West Texas near El Paso. And then we'll go to tomorrow. So this is where you start to see the bigger outbreak tomorrow as the low starts to develop. A large area at slight risk in the western part of Texas, marginal risk extending northward into the Oklahoma Panhandle, back west into New Mexico, and it looks like the marginal risk is as far east as about Dallas-Fort Worth. The outlook for Wednesday, this is, let me just make sure I've got the right date. So this is today is the 11th, so this is actually Wednesday 12Z into Thursday 12Z. They have a marginal risk for East Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas into northwestern Mississippi. I think that this could wind up being something a bit more important in that we could see this upgraded to, or at least part of this area winds up getting upgraded to a slight risk for severe weather. Look at the extent of the general thunderstorms going all the way up into the Great Lakes. And in their long range right now, they're going that predictability is too low. So I have said many times, when you see the Storm Prediction Center showing it in the 4 to 8 day time frame, it's usually a good idea to pay attention. and they're not showing anything for Thursday. So for Thursday into Friday, which kind of makes sense to me. So I want to start tonight with the. I'm going to use the paint box a little bit tonight. Haven't done that in a while, but I just want to illustrate what's going to be happening with the upper pattern as we go through this week. This is actually for Wednesday, so I kind of jumped into Wednesday morning here. A couple of things I want you to notice. First off, there is no blocking. Okay, the flow in the Atlantic is just, pretty much moving right along. There is no blocking to speak of, and you can just follow the jet here that runs, pretty much across. Excuse me, it's on an angle there, so it's a west-southwest flow. Sorry about that. My 60-year-old hands every once in a while decide to cramp up. A little bit of aging arthritis beginning to show. You've got a trough that runs from Newfoundland down out to the Atlantic along 60 degrees west. You have a deep trough out in the west, and that's this thing right in here. Very deep trough, and inside, the general deep trough, you've got this upper low right there in northeastern New Mexico. That is the shortwave trough that is now swinging into Southern California, and that is the energy that's going to drive the storm up north-northeast. If you notice that the flow at this part of the atmosphere is almost south to north here. So the surface low is going to want to go more north before it tries to turn more northeast. You have this strong ridge in the east that's very, very formidable. And it's going to take some work to break this down. The elements of breaking that trough down are on the table here going forward. And I want to illustrate where we're going with respect to the overall pattern in just a handful of days, because that's from Wednesday. By the time we get to Sunday, we've got an entirely different pattern that is setting up in the eastern part, across North America. So I'm going to get rid of this, and now I'm going to show you the upper air for Sunday. And notice it's a complete flip. As strong as that ridge in the east is, the pattern does flip. The one common thread that you have between what you just saw a little while ago and this upper air pattern is the fact that, once again, we have no blocking out in the Atlantic. Weather systems are just going to pretty much move right along. It's a progressive pattern, so it kind of makes sense that the ridge wouldn't hold on for a whole lot of time. Now we've got, by Sunday, a trough in the east, and for the first time in a long time, we've got a ridge building up in the west. And this is the positive Pacific North America index signal that the teleconnections have been giving in its long range for the last 5 or 6 days. But I would also stress that when you look at these indices, I noticed today on a number of weather social media platforms, people really just focusing so much on this, strong PNA signal, strong PNA signal, strong PNA signal. Well, I have to tell you that the strong PNA signal is all fine and dandy, except you've got other stuff going on here, okay? And that includes a no blocking at all, and also includes a pattern that is cold, but it's nothing like what we just experienced. This PNA, by the way, this strong positive North America index signal is really being driven, the vast majority of it is being driven by this deep trough that is down at 160 and this very deep upper low that is developing in the Gulf of Alaska. That is where the bulk of the positive signal lies. It lies out of that upper low. So I just wanted to illustrate here, at least to show you how important this storm in the Great Plains is, because it is going to be pretty much driving the whole weather pattern change, the temporary weather pattern change in the east. So if you look at the upper air here on the map, I'll bring up the, let me bring that back up for you so you can see it. You can watch that ridge in the east and the trough swinging out in the west. There it is. And you can see there how it lifts up, initially goes northward and then starts to go northeastward, and then it weakens. But the ridge does break down, and then it's replaced by a trough in the east and a ridge in the west. And of course, a lot of what may or may not happen next week is going to hinge on all the fine details. We'll get to that in a moment. I want to now go back to our Great Plains storm here. It's not often you see 972 lows anywhere, but if you're going to see them, you in the plains and in the Great Lakes, it's likely that you will see them in the month of March and into the early part of April. And indeed, this storm really, this energy that comes in with that wrapped up upper low, deepens rapidly, and the pressures drop down to a 972 pressure. This is by Wednesday evening when we're at peak intensity of this storm system, a wrapped up low, and the tilt, because of the depth of the trough in the west and the ridge in the east, the system's kind of tilted in the sense that you got all this warm air that goes way up north. Usually you wind up seeing the cold air, the cold air of the north kind of squishing down so that it would be snowing across, say, Minnesota and into Iowa. The isobars would be pointed toward the Great Lakes, but the trough is so far to the left and the ridge is so strong in the east. If you look at where the isobars are pointed here, they're actually pointed north-northeast. That's where the initial push is. So you got all this warm advection that goes all the way up into Minnesota, into Wisconsin, the heavy rains they get into Minnesota, eastern parts of South Dakota and Nebraska. Then the low starts to translate northeast. After Wednesday night, you begin to see the pressures rise. So it reaches its peak intensity, the low opens up and heads up towards the Great Lakes. Meanwhile, here in the east, we're fine. We've got this nice high, kind of sits here, good weather through into Thursday. Temperatures are going to be a little lower tomorrow, then they'll start to come up on Wednesday, and we should be at least through the 50s in many areas on Thursday, depending on the wind direction. If it's either south or south-southwest, makes a big difference this time of year. But there's your low, runs up to the Great Lakes. And by the way, you'll notice that the area of snow also peaks in intensity during the day Wednesday, and then it's still showing some hefty snows Wednesday night into Thursday morning, but the magnitude is diminishing as this low begins to slowly weaken, so that by the time it gets into eastern Canada and the front that's coming into the eastern part of the United States, that front that arrives here for Friday is going to be, nothing special. There'll be some showers with it, and that's it. Temperatures, I think, will probably get into the 60s away from the ocean, and then we start to turn drier and colder for the weekend. It's St. Patrick's Day is Sunday, so it's a 2-day celebration. The New York City parade is on Saturday, because when St. Patrick's Day is on a Sunday, they don't do the parade on Sunday. And a lot of the local parades in your areas, they may have already had them, or they have them for this weekend. Either way, the weather looks fine. In fact, if you look at the weather map across the country for Sunday, there is very little going on with respect to precipitation. It's pretty much high pressure from coast to coast. And then we'll start to look at what models are trying to hint at for next week. We've got the European, the Canadian. There's going to be some energy, some southern stream energy. You can see how the GFS handles it, with a low moving across Florida and passing well off the southeast coast. And then there's northern energy that's trying to come down, and they stay pretty much unfazed. The GFS keeps them separate. The Canadian has been trying to bring something up close to the coast now for about 5 or 6, ever since it got into its long-range period, and it's doing it again today. So ever since it started to see this inside its 240-hour period, there's your low on the Canadian. Now here's the thing, folks. The GFS, I'll use the GFS. Well, we'll look at the Canadian 500 first. See, the Canadian's got this southern stream energy. It's got some stuff that comes down from the north. It tries to sort of phase them together, but it's got enough here where it tries to bring it up the coast. There's a short wave behind it that will probably act to try and squash all of this. So that's how the Canadian sees it. The GFS, same pieces, but timing is all different. And I have to tell you, I'm not especially bullish from what I'm seeing. If you're looking for a late season snow event here for the coastal Northeast, I think you're really pushing it with what we have, because there's too many short waves running around, so they would have to time out perfectly, and I continue to see this almost straight line flow off the Mid-Atlantic straight out into the ocean. It's a flat flow out offshore. It's going to take an awful lot to get. You're going to have to get this energy to come into the U.S. and come into the Great Lakes much further to the west than what the models are showing right now. That's not to say it couldn't happen. I'm just saying that there's a lot of formidable obstacles here with regards to all this energy running around, and we're too far out into the long range to make any definitive conclusions. And the European, I think, is probably the flattest of them all, with this, northwest, this east-west trough that drops down across the Great Lakes. We've had a number of systems play out this way this winter that all wound up getting squashed to the south. I just wonder whether that this is going to be the same outcome with this. We don't have the blocking we had last year. It's a totally different upper air. It's a totally different setup. And I think that, is there a chance? Of course there's a chance. I just think there's too much stacked against you with regards to trying to pull off a last-minute snow event just as winter is ending and astronomical spring arrives I believe on the 21st. So this time around, last year we were sitting here at this time being resolutely bullish on the chances for snow in the coming 10 days, 10-day period, starting, here we are at the 11th, carrying us through about the 22nd, 23rd. I forgot when the date of the last nor'easter was. I think it was on the 22nd. But the bottom line is, last year at this time, we were sitting with a very obvious big blocking pattern. There was a lot out there on the models saying that there was the potential for several major events, and they all indeed did play out in a once in an. I bet you that we won't see something like that happen again for a long, long time. Those are the types of things that happen every 20 or 30 years. When you to string 4 nor'easters in a row like that, I would be shocked if I would ever see that again in my lifetime. There'll be other fascinating things that will show up, but I don't think that 4 nor'easters in 2.5 weeks is going to be on the list of events that will play out again. And by the way, I'm talking about 4 real nor'easters, which is what those, for the most part, what those storms were, and not flat waves that run out that give you a northeast wind at 10 to 20 miles an hour. There's a huge difference with regards to that. So let me come back over to the chat board. I'm going to. We're coming up on 8 o'clock, so I'm just going to give a couple of minutes here to you guys. The 21st, 22nd, Scott Briller last year, Central Park, 8.4 inches of snow, and my house in Central Long Island, 19 inches of snow. And it was the snowiest month, March on record, for my area anyway, out on Long Island. But that's not something that's going to, when they happen, when you get months like that, you think that it's always going to be like that. Because when it snows that much, you're thinking that, boy, that was pretty easy. And then reality sets in when you get the kind of months that we got this winter, like December, January, and February. If the setups aren't there, you're not going to pull it off. And sometimes you get, perfect setups that last for a while and play out over several events. And those are the exceptions and not the rule. The Met Office, Earl Warren says he issued yellow warnings for Tuesday, Wednesday. Storm Gareth hits, UK forecasters say strong winds will hit Northern Ireland before spreading eastward to Scotland. Okay, so let me bring that up. Mr. Warren, hang on one second. With the snow events that we've had here, it's been, I haven't really been paying close attention to the weather in Europe for the last couple of weeks. But you do have a pretty wrapped up gale here. Hang on a second. There's a 952 low there south of Iceland. So there's your storm. Makes total sense. And you should be getting rain from that now. The leading edge of rain, the gradient is crazy tight. The low skims, the actual low center is a 59 pressure, skims the north coast of Scotland. Even the GFS is actually even showing some snow. I guess that would be in higher elevations there in in Wales and on up through western parts of Scotland. And then that low starts to fill and weaken as it moves eastward into northwestern Europe. Still getting some streams of showers coming in, though, from the flow off the ocean. And then there's another deep low, a 958 low on Friday that goes by just north of Scotland. It looks like the gradient here is a bit less tight than what's going on now. That low goes a little bit further to the north on this particular run and goes crashing into Norway and Sweden. And then there's a southern stream system here for Saturday that actually produces some snow over Ireland and over Scotland. I'm going to look at this a bit closer tonight and see if there's anything substantial that's possible out of this. Going to look at the profiles of the atmosphere and see if I can figure that out. But yeah, I can understand, Earl, that they got that yellow alert for you guys with respect to the system that's coming through tonight and for tomorrow. And of course, you saw on the map there also showing stuff for later in the week. Chris Alley, nice to see you on board tonight. Amy Hogan, it's amazing how warm it can feel just to get out there in that really strong March sun. It does its job. Robert Hurley, late March, early April snow is not good. All my bushes were down on the ground from the wet snow of last year. It took a while to get the snow off of them. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But just bear in mind, this is not last year. They're not going to be 4 nor'easters or 3 nor'easters or 2 nor'easters to deal with. I don't even know if we're going to get one. The Europeans got a really wrapped up low off the southeast coast on its 10-day map, which you know that tonight it won't have it. But really, everything that I'm looking at would suggest to me that this thing would probably wind up being flat, and anything that develops would be further to the east. But you know what? We could come in tomorrow and see some subtle changes in the upper air that might suggest otherwise. I do think, by the way, that once this period of change we go through that next week, that after that ridge in the west is going to disappear, and we're going to go into what looks to be like a fairly spring-like pattern that is going to shape up. And Johnny Quest, by the way, I did see you earlier mention that you got 65 inches. I assume you said 65 inches. I assume, is that rain or snow from last? I mean, no, you had over 100 inches last year. So is that your snowfall for the winter? Because if that is, I certainly believe it, considering all the events that impacted Western Virginia this winter with these ones that went to the south. But 65 inches is a pretty good number for you with regards to total snowfall. Let me mention, by the way, tomorrow night I will be at the Westwood Library in Westwood, New Jersey at 7 o'clock. That's up in Bergen County. It's off the Garden State Parkway. It looks pretty easy to get to. 7 o'clock, I will be live streaming. I'm going to attempt to live stream from the library tomorrow, Keith James. It depends on when I get there and I see what the setup is and how strong the signal is. Some libraries have stronger wireless signals than others, but if they do have a strong enough signal, I will live stream straight from there. And if you can make it, if you're out in North Jersey, come on out. 7 o'clock, Westwood Library in Westwood, New Jersey. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up here at this point. Thanks for being here. We're going to try the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight at 9:25 Eastern Time. So do tune in on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. If you want an expanded weather experience, consider joining my weather page, my weather platform on Patreon. That is patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. There's a link to the descriptor to this live stream and the descriptor to this video. It's just $2 a month, and you get extra live streams. The Patreon folks got their live stream tonight at 6 o'clock, and it's nice because it's a small crowd and I can get to all your questions. We have 256 members, by the way. It's a nice little weather community. There's no nonsense. You don't have to deal with flat earthers, geoengineers, and all the rest of it. So I put the link up on the chat for those of you who are interested. And the other thing is my free weather app on Google Play or on the App Store. It works on all mobile devices, so download and enjoy. And we will see you. Hopefully we'll get the live stream from the library set up, and we'll be doing that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Good night, everybody.